you're still saying the same idea, but just wording it differently. Then by reading all of those different versions of that thing that you're saying, give the player a much deeper, closer to, almost perfect understanding of what the writer is intending or the developer is intending. Hey, I'm Demon Dev, and I've been thinking a lot about challenges that I've faced with this project lately and trying to give myself more credit for, what I've overcome. And something that I come back to a lot and I've talked about in a lot of my videos is just how hard trying to make come true what is the ultimate goal for me, which was some sort of a change in the way that dialogue choices could be for players, so that it's more of the core mechanic and less of kind of a side gimmick. And I wanted to kind of dig into deeper some of the issues that arose with that. So the interesting thing about this, which is, I think, unusual for me relative to a lot of other people making games, is I, in a sense, stumbled across the core idea really early on. So I'm about 5.5 years into the project from when I started working on these sorts of things. And the core idea being, okay, I can take what a normal dialogue option would be in a game where you have different choices, like a hostage negotiation. I can take that choice and I can break it up into its components, and that will make it more fair. So if you have, being mean or being nice, that's not actually as simple as that. There are properties of like the wording, the sentence that you choose, that means something, that have some sort of an idea, and then there are the feelings that you kind of apply onto them. And I had the realization that it's actually difficult, maybe impossible, to separate meaning from expression. You have to express, a sentence with words, and those words kind of carry their own feelings alongside of them. But by separating out different ways of expressing the same idea, you basically, at that intersection point, you create sort of a fair or systematized meaning. So it's possible to misinterpret what a dialogue option is, even if you write it out fully. You can still, not really get the full feel of what it means for that character to say that thing. Whether it's, trying to push someone to give you information, or pressure someone to join your side, or to apologize. It's complex. But if you present that idea as an option for the player to take from many different ways, you're still saying the same idea, but just wording it differently. Then by reading all of those different versions of that thing that you're saying, you actually give the player a much deeper, closer to, almost perfect understanding of what the writer is intending, or the developer is intending, or what the character is intending, as much as you can, because that's hopefully a lot of us, I think, at least at some points that are important, we're trying to find the words to say something, and we have to choose. So involving the player in that process of, okay, I've decided I'm going to, challenge someone here. They did something mean, and I have to tell them that's not okay. In real life, how am I going to say that? Am I going to say it in like an understanding way? It's just like, hey, I know this was like an accident, but you shouldn't have, said that was mean. Or am I going to be more aggressive? Like, how dare you? Like, that was totally out of line. You better apologize now, or I'm seriously reconsidering this friendship, stuff like that. Totally different ways of expressing the same idea, though, that you disapprove of their behavior. And even saying disapprove of your behavior, that's not some sort of isolated meaning. That also has an attached, kind of reserved or serious tone, or more of a firm tone but it is also an expression of the same idea. So when you bring multiple of those together, I've created a very difficult to catch feature of dialogue systems where you do get systematized meaning by expressing the same idea multiple ways. So I'm really proud of that. That was an idea that came within the first year of work on the project, maybe a couple months in, when I was continually frustrated that there weren't consistent properties of dialogue systems. So anyways, that's the whole side of like what the idea was. So what was the challenges that I met? Well, first off, kind of lack of references. Okay, so I want these consistent properties that the player can understand compared to each other. They need to be simple enough that they're manageable and maybe intuitive. For a while, I was like, well, should there be a philosophical library or like categorization of what you're saying? Like the deeper meaning of what you're saying, like what category does this fit into? What type of person says this? I messed around with that for a while, but that becomes very arbitrary and is kind of boring also. It does not connect on a level that makes the player feel, I don't know, inspired to read many dialogue options. That was the other huge challenge is, okay, great. So maybe it's more fair. The player gets an idea of what's going on a lot better if they can read like 3 versions of the same idea that you're going to say right now in this conversation. But wow, that's a lot of reading. I've taken the problem of, dialogue of selection paralysis and exploded it out of control. Like, great. Not only do you choose to be mean or nice in a meaning sense, so like, challenging a person or forgiving them, but you also have to figure out the way you're going to do that. So it becomes, multiplicative or exponential depending on how many options there are. So that's a huge issue. And in the early days, I thought that wasn't deep enough, that you should also be choosing whether to stay on the current subject or branch off into another subject, and that you could manage multiple different trains of thought or trains of conversation, different subjects at the same time in parallel, and kind of jump between them, and the AIs could jump between them. And then a huge part of the conversation was wrestling the topic. But that was terrible. It was like not fun at all. And again, exploded the options, exploded the paralysis. It was just kind of a gross UI to be selecting options at 3 different levels. It was impossible to keep track of what was important. And it kept pressuring me to build content for this. So I was building these really vague conversations that could go in so many different directions that may even be ideal to motivate the relationship to move in one way or another. But so that was a disaster. It took me a really long time to realize that keeping it at expression and meaning was the end game. I also didn't know how many emotions should be attached. For a while, I had 6 sliders, mean to friendly, serious to funny, smart or dumb to smart, timid to confident, simple or cliche to unique, and those sliders worked really well on a negative to positive scale. That was more intuitive to use as a writer and more intuitive to understand, to see those properties like, oh, this is mean. But where does it stop? For a while, you were able to move all 6 of those sliders for any property of a conversation. So like, what does a dialogue option mean if it's like 2 points out of 10 mean and like 3 points out of 10 smart and 1 point out of 10 timid? And it was like, it was so messy and muddy, and I was trying to go for realism, but even in real life, we have to condense things down to a digestible format to make decisions. It's not all about having detail. It's about having meaningful detail. And that took a really long time to realize as well. And that brought me back to a very punishing exploration process, which was that figuring out these things, I did sketches and journals about it endlessly, but it really always took oftentimes not just building out like what it would look like in game and making it sort of run, choosing one or two options and kind of seeing how that felt, figuring out where the dialogue boxes should go, because now I want to expand the dialogue boxes to show like, at its maximum 36 different dialogue options, 6 meanings and 6 expressions nested within those. Now, it's not quite as bad as reading 36 at the maximum, because you quickly develop a skill for saying like, oh, these are all expressions of the same idea. So you really do develop a mastery of that faster than like, oh, I have no idea what this dialogue option is. So it's not as bad as 36 sounds, but still a lot. So how do I arrange those? How do I support that maximum number of options? I probably won't use it too often, but okay, am I going to do a horizontal or a vertical layout? This is VR, so reading text is already tough. I chose a lot of things that I really wanted to do that were difficult. VR was super challenging for this, but also exciting. I felt like the community would be more welcoming. So anyways, that was some of the really hard things that I faced, and ultimately one of the most difficult was that I didn't know how to make that approachable from a writer standpoint either. Writing is one of my, even though I love talking and I feel like I have a lot of great ideas, converting things into dialogue is a huge challenge for me still. And trying to find an environment where I could write within the system was really difficult. But I think I'm making serious headway on a lot of these challenges, and so I thought I would kind of give a recap where I've gone. I've rebuilt the tool for writing within this system over and over and over. It doesn't really matter how many times, maybe 5 times, but regardless, it took about 5 years to come to a place where I'm really happy with the ability to kind of quickly proceed through it all. But just some specific struggles that I've gone through with this project, and trying to figure out how to take something that I really wanted to do and actually make it work. And I still don't know how fun it is, but I feel connected to how it works in game and out of game to write for it. So I think I'm in a better place now, but there's a lot to see. All right, well, have a good one.